Hello, DawgNation, and welcome to the conclusion of our Senior Bowl coverage. I'm Kaylee Mansell with Mike Griffith. We've been in Mobile all week long, had to come back home and tackle some things, but that doesn't distract from the fact that today Marcus Rosemy-Jacksaint opens up with the first touchdown of the game. Taiyke Smith has a huge pass breakup, and Javon Bullard with multiple stops. But, Mike, I have to say the thing that immediately grabbed my attention and made me so sad is when the announcers came over on the air and said, "This is the last game of college football that we're going to have this season." How does that make you feel?
Well, for me, the Senior Bowl's seeing these guys wearing the G1 last time, right? That Georgia helmet. I like it. I think it's cool. One of the cool components of these all-star games is when players wear their helmets. I know for a while they were swapping all those stickers, and it was kind of like, don't do that. That graffiti's bad. But it was kind of cool to see the Georgia guys, wearing their Georgia gear all week and Georgia shirts underneath pads, and, of course, wearing their helmets today. The last chance you get to see them represent the Georgia Bulldogs in uniform. And as you said, Marcus with the first touchdown and really the only team touchdown for the American team today. I mean, that was a great moment for him. That was something he told us this week that he thinks he can do in the NFL. Didn't really get that opportunity at Georgia. That wasn't really his route. When you got guys like Brock Bowers and Lad McConkey, you're going to throw it up to guys like that. But, Marcus felt like he could show that he could catch that end zone fade route. And, of course, we saw earlier this week, Kaylee, that all that speed work that Marcus has been doing has really paid off. I mean, I thought he had a great week. I thought he looked fast. And, I was happy for him that he was able to kind of top off the week with that touchdown catch.
One thing I don't think that we touched on enough this week, and you see it on my hat here, this year was the 75th Reese's Senior Bowl. So when you think about it, these six dogs got to be a part of history. They brought back an all-star team for the 75th game, and this is a moment and a part in history that these guys will forever get to say that they were a part of.
Yeah, also the first All-Star game that had juniors in it. So, like you say, a couple of pretty cool honors to, have the 75th, playing the 75th Senior Bowl. And the game takes on a greater and greater and greater importance every year with the level of involvement. We've always seen a lot of the NFL assistant coaches and coordinators down here, and then the head coaches started coming, then the GM started coming, and then it kind of became an unofficial convention where coaches looking for jobs were down here. Players looking for jobs. We saw JT Daniels down here looking for a job. I guess Clemson has some interest in him. That's kind of interesting. Minnesota, another team. They're different people talking to different prospects about jobs. I know not necessarily happening on the sideline of the game, or you don't really hear about it on Saturday night game day. But these are the things that are taking place at their downtown hotel and in restaurants all around town. This is an opportunity, kind of an unofficial convention of sorts for the NFL, because so much personnel is down here, especially early in the week, Kaylee, when we were down there knocking out all those interviews that people can find on the DawgNation YouTube channel.
And you mentioned earlier that game opening touchdown for Marcus Rosemy-Jacksaint, but I feel like a person who had a major impact on the field today was Javon Bullard, a guy who we didn't necessarily have the best couple of days of practice, but then again, they weren't allowing him the opportunity to see his strength. You mentioned his strengths. He likes to go out and hit people, and we finally got to see that out of him today, and I thought that he performed exceptionally well.
Yeah, he kind of turned a corner on Wednesday with some of the pass coverage, and you got to kind of get your footing, and you're on a new field, you're playing a little bit different terminology, a little bit different scheme, facing new personnel. I think Javon adjusted well, and I think he'll continue to do that. I mean, I think he's a baller. I think he's a really good player. He's great in run support. You mentioned all four of his tackles came in the first quarter, so he had a good, strong start to the game, and I think he left here. At least holding his stock. As you mentioned, the pass coverage wasn't scintillating, but that's not the strength, right? I mean, he's got to get good at it. He's got to get better at it. But he's got a workman-like attitude, and he talked about that in the story I wrote about him just a couple days ago on DawgNation.com, that best never rests. And that's just the work ethic and the attitude that he's going to bring into whatever camp. And most Georgia guys bring that. And when you play in a system like Kirby Smart has, where there's that constant constructive criticism or even just poking around from Kirby on the microphone. Javon was talking about, hey, I still get called out on that. And, you hear that voice in your head that you can constantly do things better. And, even in a quote unquote more relaxed environment like the Senior Bowl, where you have NFL coaches, you're still hearing that voice in your head to push yourself, that it can be done better, to really re-examine practice film after every day. And I think we saw Javon Bullard get better and better each day of the Senior Bowl week.
So let's talk about Lad McConkey, because we saw him get in the game for a few different plays today, but have as good of a game as we've seen him in practice all week long. But you could just tell the overall hype and the vibe that was around Lad this week. He was listed as an impact player for his squad. You could see at the bottom they have the ticker with all the mock drafts and the top 50 prospects, and they had Lad right in there at 41, 42, and 43. I mean, thinking about day one to now, how have you seen the hype around Lad McConkey grow through the Senior Bowl?
Well, I mean, the hype grew. I mean, but really, it was that day one. I mean, he just hit the Senior Bowl like a tidal wave. He was uncoverable. He was electric. I think he might have tweaked his ankle a little bit. I know I asked him about it at the media day, and he kind of downplayed it and said, everybody here has something wrong. But look, we know the deal. Lad's been dealing with this ankle injury really since it might have been the Ole Miss game, and then he retweaked it against Tennessee. Was less than 100% in the SEC championship game. Got healthy enough and showed us some juice against Florida State in the Orange Bowl. But the ankle has been an issue. It's been something he's been getting treatment for. And look, there's no secrets. The NFL knows these things. I'm not saying anything that, someone's going to go, oh, my gosh, I can't believe it. Look, the NFL knows all of it. They need to know all of it. They need to know that Lad played through that ankle this week to show them that, yes, this is a guy who can play through pain. This is a guy who can handle daily treatment, nurse an injury throughout the week, and then still show up in the game and be productive. Because that's what they want to see. I mean, Lad's not a soft guy. I mean, the back injury at the start of the year, that's its own issue. He's going to get asked about that. Every team doctor, they're going to do a report, and they're going to look at it, and they're going to x-ray it, and they're going to see what Lad's back looks like because he missed the first 4 games, and they're going to talk to him about the ankle. Lad and his agent are going to have to make a decision between now and the NFL Combine. Does he do the testing there, or does he wait until Pro Day? Typically, that's what Pro Day is for guys that either A, don't get an NFL Combine invite, or B, have some injury carryover from the regular season, or in this case, from the All-Star game. I know Lad will work extremely hard, and he's going to want to compete at the Combine, and it may be a situation where he does some things but not the others. But again, he's got about 4 weeks to work on it, and I know he will, and he'll try to go at the Combine and do what he can. But the good news is that there's a Pro Day in March let's see, I'm trying to think if the Combine is – he'll have, 2 or 3 more weeks, because I think the start of spring football is mid-March, and the Combine starts about the end of February. So that would buy him a couple more weeks to get his ankle back and run the kind of 40 that he wants.
So here's what I took away from the Lad situation this week, aside from skill set, right? You mentioned that a lot of guys, when they go through the Senior Bowl, they have a good day one practice. Sometimes we don't see them back for day 2 or day 3. We saw Lad the entire time that we were there. And I'm not going to call out anybody in particular, but Lad went out there on the field today versus a guy like Michael Penix Jr., who did not even attempt to go out on the field. What does that say, not just about the culture that the UGA program has instilled in these guys, but what that says about Lad McConkey as a player, too?
Well, I mean, Lad's a tough guy, and Lad's a pleaser. And, when we asked Lad, what would you want teams to know about it? He said, whatever you want me to do, I'll do. I mean, if you think that you might want to use him as a kick returner or a punt returner, or, I think he could prove too valuable for that in the NFL like he did at Georgia. But he's a pleaser, and he's a hungry football player. And like I said, the fact that, as you mentioned, he went back out there, Michael Penix Jr., I think it's kind of a situation of like, well, what else do you have left to prove? I mean, he had a Heisman Trophy runner-up season. He had really good practices. There was no reason to play in that game for him. I mean, Spencer Rattler, 4 for 4 throwing the ball, and he's done, right? Played the first quarter. I mean, that's why when you look at the score and say, oh my gosh, 16-7, well, they're trying to win, but you're trying to play a lot of different guys, and it gets a little disjointed. I mean, Spencer Rattler plays all 4 quarters. I think, the South or the SEC team probably wins. Conversely, Sam Hartman, a player from Notre Dame that I know you were interested in, seeing how he would fare this week, didn't exactly have the best game.
He did not have the greatest game, but he did have the greatest hair highlights of all time.
That's too funny. You know what? I can't really assess that part. I wasn't really watching for that as much as I was some of the other facets of.
The NFL Network put that on him heavy. Okay,
They went there.
Yes, they knew exactly what they were doing. They had a whole segment about his hair, so you and I can have this conversation because the NFL is ready just as much. So I'm not going to let you sit here and make it be something that you thought it wasn't when NFL Network was trying to make it a thing too. But for the sake of professionalism, we're going to move on from that conversation.
Well, speaking of something that we thought it was that wasn't, how about Daijun Edwards? I mean, didn't get an opportunity. That's disappointing. It just goes to show you how competitive it is for repetitions. And Daijun was a late add to the game. And, a lot of these guys, they sort of negotiate. Well, I'll go if I get this many carries, or I'll go, but I really don't want to play in the game. I mean, there's a lot of that give and take between agents and the Senior Bowl. And it's not exactly like, well, let's just see who earns the reps or who the best guys are. I mean, like you said, Michael Penix didn't play. I'm not positive, but it wouldn't surprise me if that was known before he even came down there, that, he'll go through the week of practice, but he's not going to play in the game. Now, I could be wrong. It could be that his agent said, you know what, let's shut it down after Wednesday, or for all, who knows, or maybe there was a, man, my shoulder's, a little bit sore, right? You don't know what it is. Now, again, the NFL knows. We don't know, but the NFL knows. So it's not ideal, but all-star games are what they are. At least I'll say this for the Senior Bowl. They're playing real football. I mean, that NFL Pro Bowl turned into something that was so unwatchable, so horrible. I don't even know what to say. It really was an abomination and didn't do the game justice. But at least they're still playing football at the Senior Bowl. You do want to take care of guys. You want to be careful. There's a lot of money at stake here. A lot of players have had long and illustrious careers, and nobody wants to get injured in the Senior Bowl. So, guys are probably being a little bit more careful with their tackles. I think it's a pretty clean game. And yet still, Javon was able to get 4 tackles. And, I think you mentioned, Taiyke. I mean, look, Taiyke needed to show he could play high safety. And I think the 3 pass breakups, Kaylee, I think that constituted a really good game for Taiyke Smith.
Mm-hmm. It's like you mentioned, it was a 16-7 score, not exactly what you were expecting to see from an all-star game. I really do think it was a very defensive-heavy game, and I think that the analysts recognize that as well. And you mentioned Taiyke Smith. I really thought out of all 6 dogs that were there, Taiyke was one of the dogs that performed the most consistently all week. And you're right. He told us at the beginning of the week that the thing that he wanted to prove the most was how versatile he was in that high safety position. And I think we saw that out of him this week. Were you impressed with his overall performance?
I really was. And, I thought Taiyke carried himself really well. I thought he competed out there. You expect that from a Georgia safety, but sometimes when a guy plays a different position, you're not exactly sure how quickly he'll be able to transition and, what his skills will be like at that position. I mean, just because it worked best for Georgia for him to play star doesn't necessarily mean that's where he's going to play in the NFL. I think Mark Webb was a really good example of that. Another guy who had a really outstanding Senior Bowl a few years ago, and I think he got Mark drafted in the 4th or 5th round when he kind of looked like might be a free agent. And the same might be true for Taiyke. I mean, he was a guy that I don't know what he's going to run or jump or lift at the NFL Combine in 3 or 4 weeks, but Taiyke was a guy that needed to come here and show he could do more things. So I think he did. So I thought today was a good opportunity for him. And then, it's not often where we say if we're not talking about a guy, it's good news. But that's the case with William Mote. You don't want to know who the long snapper is. You don't even want to think about him. You don't want to know his number. You don't want to know where he's from. You don't want to see his bio on the TV. You just want him to do his job quietly. And William Mote, a long snapper, and a guy that might be able to get in as a free agent. I mean, it's a tough job. Not a bad way to go in the NFL to be the long snapper. It gets you on the field. It gets you on the roster. The guy's got 2 national championship rings, just like anybody else. And he's got a specialty craft, and he did it well today. So, congrats to William Mote as well.
And for those at home watching, William Mote is a name that you are going to want to remember. I cannot tell you the reason right now that you need to pay attention. You need to keep that because it could come in handy later, and that's all I'm going to disclose about that. But Mike, As we wrap up our Senior Bowl coverage, I have to say it's been a pleasure to work with you all week. What were your key takeaways from being in Mobile these last few days?
Well, it was a very deep field of talent with the juniors added. Talking with Jim Nagy, the executive director of the Senior Bowl, and a guy that was an NFL scout for 20 years, Super Bowls with the New England Patriots, Green Bay Packers, and Seattle Seahawks. And he's a knowledgeable guy. He really goes out of his way for DawgNation, and I really appreciated that. He gave us some great information on the Georgia players. I know he was a little disappointed and sad Cedric Van Pran didn't make it after accepting the invite, but it's a business, and that's just what you have to understand. They have advisors now, that tell them whether or not they should or shouldn't play. They're off training somewhere, and you just never know what's going on. But the takeaway is that Georgia is extremely relevant in the Senior Bowl with the kind of players that Kirby Smart's turning out. And now that juniors are eligible, I think you're going to continue to see a large contingent of Georgia players. I mean, there were more Georgia guys at the Senior Bowl than Alabama or Auburn guys. And typically, those are the guys that kind of get thrown in as the extras because of that home crowd. But this year, Dajon Edwards had that opportunity. And although, unfortunately, we didn't get to see him showcase his abilities today, you and I got to see Dajon all week, and he looked spectacular. So I do think he made himself some money. Those practices are watched as close or closer by the NFL personnel than the actual game. It's almost like the game is for the fans and an exhibition, but those practices are really scrutinized by NFL personnel. And I thought all the Georgia players performed really well. And there's just a certain air. I mean, there's kids wearing Georgia, T-shirts and bringing the hell. I mean, usually it used to be back in the day, it was all Alabama and Auburn fans that would swarm this game. But you see Georgia fans here now. And after those practices, I saw Marcus Rosemy-Jacksaint and William Mode and Dajon. I saw them run over and sign those autographs. And, Georgia's part of the show. And, it's such, the brand has gotten so big, and there's a certain expectation. Oh, wow, look, there's a Georgia guy. I mean, Look, they're all great football players, Kaylee. All of these guys, I mean, I think the Senior Bowl ratio is like 90% of the guys that play in the Senior Bowl are going to get drafted. I mean, in truth, in a vacuum, they're all equal. But that G really travels and really means something. That brand, those 2 national titles, and I don't know about you, Kirby, but I thought it was a really big deal when Kirby and 4 or 5 Georgia guys came down. And I know Kirby, and I
realize you just called me Kirby. I don't mean to.
Did I call you Kirby? Did I call you Kaylee?
Might be the thing you've ever said to me, Mike.
Maybe I said to Kirby. Kirby, I thought it was a really big deal when Kaylee Mansell came down here to cover this game. No, Kaylee, I thought it was a really big deal, Kaylee, that Kirby came down and was here with his staff. And I went over to him, and it's so funny. Kirby's kind of, for those who don't know, most coaches have a guy next to him that like you got to go through to get the interview, right? Kirby's his own guy. Kirby will decide. He'll decide when he does the interview and where he does the interview. So I found him. I did the Where's Waldo, because after practice, all the players are scattered. There's bodies everywhere. You can't see over these giants because they're all 6'3", 5, 7, and they're all around you. And you're just searching frantically to see if Kirby Smart's somewhere in this mix. And oh my gosh, there he was. And so I reached out, hey, Kirby, how are you, man? She goes, hey, Mike, how's it going? I said, hey, you want to do a quick interview? He goes, no, I don't want to do a quick interview. And that, and it's like, okay, well, that's it. Kirby's not. Now, Kalen DeBoer, the Alabama coach, they're like, oh, yeah. They led him over to the tunnel, come on over here. This is going to be good. It's like, yeah, that really wasn't good, Kalen. Probably wasn't as prepared for that interview. Probably a lesson for Kalen DeBoer that this ain't Sioux Falls. The fastballs are going to come a little higher and tighter, a little bit tougher. Kirby Smart knows that. That's why he's not doing the interview. He doesn't want to talk about the NCAA investigation going on in Tennessee. He doesn't want to talk about the new alliance between. Kirby doesn't want to talk about anything that's not going to help Georgia win championships. And they're not going to stand there and ask simple questions. They're going to ask him tough questions. So why do it? As I've told you before, Kirby's very simple. Will this help me win a championship? Yes or no, right? There wasn't. So I understand it. Even with all the players here, there'll come a time when Kirby will talk to us at Pro Day, and he'll talk about all the players that are going to be drafted. But Kirby was not in impromptu interview mode that day. And that's just something that when you cover him, like I said, you have to understand that, when you before you reach between the bars, remember what's on the other side. And there's certain times to go view the lion and the tiger, and there's certain times not to. And when Kirby says, hey, it's not feeding time at the zoo, leave Kirby alone. So it's like, hey, handshake, hello, good to see you, cool, not going to do it, safe travels, right? Kirby's off, and before you know it, he's back in Athens, sitting courtside, supporting his basketball program and being seen and being there for other student athletes at Georgia. So that's just part of the game with Kirby. You're like, oh, why wouldn't you guys interview him? Believe me, we'd interview him every chance we get. But the head coach has a plan, and you have to respect that. And when he does go behind the microphone, I think he's very good. I think he's very transparent. He's very direct. And I would rather have, Kirby's A game, maybe less than some other coach that just gave you constant buzz that was nothing. Yeah. So I appreciate him. I appreciate covering him. It was good to see him there for his players. I know, Kaylee, it meant a lot to those players that Kirby came down to see him.
And with that will wrap up not just our Senior Bowl coverage, but the last college football game of the season. Thank y'all for joining us all week long. It was a pleasure to be at the event, see what these guys can do, and I think they represented the University of Georgia well. I want to end on the takeaway that I gathered from this. I think you hit the nail on the head when you talk about that Georgia G. When people see that, they know it means something. And I gathered that from watching the other players' interactions with the Georgia guys. It was almost like they were a source of consistency. The quarterbacks were constantly looking to throw the ball to Marcus Rosemy or Lad McConkey. And on the defensive side, every play somebody's coming to dap up Javon or Taiyke, telling them good job. The way that people are able to recognize that those guys are at the highest level of their game. They're elite competition, and they're going to do their job every single time. I think it goes back to what that Georgia G means, and that's something that I was able to pick up on this week, and that's not something a lot of programs can say about the members of their team. So, Mike Griffith, thank you for being with me all week long. DawgNation, thank you for being with me all week long. Make sure to check out all of Mike's articles on DawgNation.com that he wrote about the Senior Bowl this week. Connor and coverage tomorrow night. No On the Beat this week, am I right? No On the Beat.
Correct. No On the Beat, yeah.
DawgNation Daily all week long, Before the Hedges on Wednesday, and then Connor, Riley, and I on Thursday. As always, DawgNation, thank you for joining us. Thank you for watching the Senior Bowl, and we will see you right back here on the pages of DawgNation.com.